Hello, this is Chris Hossman, KC4F, that's Kilo Charlie 4 Foxtrot, and I'm the Amateur Radio Emergency Coordinator and Emergency Radio Officer for the City of Hampton, Virginia. Today, I'm going to be providing an introduction to the amateur radio support that is provided to the City of Hampton during emergency conditions. Our primary mission here is to provide reliable, persistent communication links between the City of Hampton Emergency Operations Center and the other City of Hampton facilities as requested. Excuse me. We have a secondary mission that is to provide weather condition reporting from sites across the city. This secondary mission may become the thing we do while we're waiting for others or waiting to be used in our primary mission. In all cases, we conduct our operations in accordance with Tab 7 to the Emergency Support Function 2, which covers communications, to the City of Hampton Emergency Operations Plan, or EOP, and our Standard Operating Procedures, or SOPs. Basically, the EOP provides the what, and the SOPs provide the how for our operations. The SOPs are broken down into specific guidance for the EOC radio support, shelter operations, other operating locations, and condition reporting, which may be from any location, even your home. There can be some significant confusion about under which name we operate. The differences between ARES and RACES is often confusing even to hams. I can't imagine how it would be to non-hams. What I tell government officials is that per CFR 47, Part 97, 407 and following, they own the RACES function, and they get to establish the requirements, policies, procedures for RACES operations. How that organization is staffed is not relevant to the requirements. All guidance in the EOP and SOPs are designated for the Hampton RACES organization. When the Hampton Public Service Team, or HPT, was first formed, we were specifically not an ARES organization. As time went on, the importance of that separation was no longer valid, and when the new ARES organization was unveiled, we decided to list the HPT as the Hampton ARES Group and effectively merged the two. People are still free to be a member of HPT, but not ARES. In terms of leadership, the ARES uses the EC, or Emergency Coordinator, position, which also has AECs as the assistant EC, and the RACES organization uses the ERO, or Emergency Radio Officer, function, and its assistance would be the AREO. Since a hurricane is our most likely activation driver and the most resource driven, these orientation sessions are focused on a hurricane deployment. When we deploy, we never deploy without activation by the city. Typically, if there is a hurricane, we have time to get things set up and go back home. Then, when we will meet at a designated time and establish our shifts. If there is an unplanned or emergent event, then we will be in more of a reaction mode, but we still don't deploy unless tasked. Leadership will typically be requested to attend briefings in advance of any deployments. We plan to provide traditional analog voice capabilities on the UHF, VHF, and perhaps HF, but that will be off-site. We will also provide digital message capabilities via both mesh and packet. As I said, once everything is up and operating, we typically provide condition reporting until and unless backup communications are needed. We have equipment in at least 22 locations around the city. Those include 8 shelters, 7 support sites, and 7 infrastructure sites. We will talk about each of these locations in this session and then go into them in detail in future sessions. Here are some of our shelters. In truth, the city can designate any school or other facility as a shelter at any time, but these are the most commonly designated shelter facilities and those that have equipment already installed. Normally, the city opens Bethel and Phoenix at the same time, first. This is because Bethel is the only pet shelter, but they feel that Bethel is not adequate to serve as a primary general population shelter. Phoenix and Andrews are constructed identically. They have 2 gyms. One gym was designed for younger children and has a rubberized floor, while the other gym is a more traditional design. The rubberized floor gym is typically used for the functional needs shelter, while the traditional gym is for the general population. Andrews, however, is in a flood zone. Eaton and Lindsay were primary shelters for many years, but recently they updated the flood maps, and those two schools are now identified in flood zones. It's undetermined what their future is. I've asked the city to clarify their status for me, because if they are not to be used as shelters anymore, there is no reason to keep our equipment, our antennas on the roof. The Northampton Community Center is in an area on Todd's Lane that traditionally floods in heavy rain. They've done significant drainage work in the area, but I don't think they have completely solved the problem. The Hampton Health Department facility is too small for a significant shelter, and the parking lot there floods as well. The city has realized that there's a shortage of suitable shelters within the city, so they have an agreement with Newport News to use Hines Middle School if needed. However, Hines has no antennas installed on it. Support sites are those locations that are not shelters, but where we intend to have staffing. These include the Emergency Operations Center, or EOC, which is housed in the back of Fire Station 11, the Incident Management Team, at least when that was at Fire Station number 9. Now that the IMT has moved to the Police Training Center, we have no equipment to support it. The city may designate the facility at Station 9 as a backup EOC, so the equipment will be used. So we'll leave it for now unstaffed and not plan to remove any equipment. The Red Cross and Salvation Army are examples of non-government organizations that we may also help staff. The city places a lot of police and fire vehicles in the convention center to ride out the storm and designates that facility as the police staging area. We will plan to locate both our trailer and the RRV, the rapid response vehicle, inside that location during the passing of the storm, and we will staff one of those vehicles as our alternate EOC for direction and control functions, as for backup direction and control functions. After the storm passes, we may have other additional support sites to staff. The city has an agreement with various radio radio stations. Currently, it's the Hampton University Radio to provide recovery-specific information on a preset time frame, such as 15 and 45 minutes after the hour. If communications are down, we may station someone at the radio station to relay that info as necessary. A digital technology would be best suited for that application, but that may not be possible. We'll work all that out at execution. Another possibility is that we'll be asked to provide communications at the public points of distribution, or pods. The pods will be located where they will hand out tarps, food, water, and other hurricane recovery supplies. Currently, they are planned to be set up in school parking lots, some school parking lots, and so they may have communications problems even if communications are operational, and so we may need to be out there with them in the middle of the parking lot to provide that communications link. Again, we'll work out all that at execution. This is a notional block diagram of communications flow through our shelters and support sites. Note that while the Red Cross is listed as self-supporting, that support is actually included in some of our people. In addition, the neighborhoods may be staffed by our own folks who are working out of their homes prior to deployment or instead of deployment. Infrastructure sites are those sites with equipment but no operating position, at least for us. Centera Careplex has 2 operating positions, but they are for HEART volunteers, none of which are our people. If they have volunteers, they may join our net. Hopefully, we'll hear from them before execution. Each of these sites has a digital or analog equipment installed that supports our communications capabilities. We'll detail the equipment and the capabilities in a later session. The City of Hampton Emergency Management Leadership consists of Mary Bunting, the city manager. During a disaster or a emergency response, she assumes the role as the city's emergency manager. Day-to-day emergency management is overseen by Weeson Walker, the emergency management coordinator. There are also 2 deputy coordinators, Gwen Pointer and Sarah Snowden. In addition, they have 2 part-time workers. These are Tracy Hanger, who is a former Hampton City Fire Chief, and Mary Hullup, who is a former Deputy Director of Hampton Social Services. They are very highly qualified individuals supporting the emergency management function. Importantly to us, all of these people greatly respect our efforts and are doing their best to support our operations. In general, the emergency management folks are our customer and our bosses. They determine which sites need to be staffed and when that should occur. So, once things kick off, one or more of the RACES leadership, that's me or John, KE4UP, or Don, KJ4MZ, and or Robert, W3AF, will attend the EOC briefings to determine the scope of the response and the initiation time. After that, we'll put out an email and or run a net to distribute the information and solicit volunteers. We'll probably gather responders at the Red Cross to talk through the concept of operations briefing that outlines our planned response. While there, we'll determine how best to distribute and deliver the shelter kits. If people have room in their own vehicles to handle and can handle the kits themselves, we'll let them take them. Otherwise, we'll arrange for the kits to be delivered. In the past, we've had great success at having a troubleshooter travel to the different sites and help get things operational. We will likely continue that practice. Once we are in response mode, we'll run an initial net to bring everyone up to speed. We typically run an informational net with periodic announcements. We typically run an informal net with periodic announcements to let people know what's going on. We'll be monitoring stations to collect their status as they proceed through their activation steps. We'll be keeping emergency management informed of our overall activation status. If and when additional volunteers become available, we will make determination as to where they are to be deployed and coordinate that with all concerned. As long as we have a troubleshooter available, we will continue their actions and get everyone active as quickly as possible, as reasonably possible. The deployed amateur radio operators are considered staff wherever they are deployed. Shelters have designated sleeping areas for staff, and you can either sleep in that location or in the operating location if there's sufficient room. Also, you can deploy there with your family, and they will be also considered shelter staff families like the rest of them. And you will all be fed along with everyone else. You will need to get a city badge so that you can enter the shelter or support site as staff. In addition, shelters have areas that are off limits to the general population, but as staff you will be allowed in those areas. In most cases, the radio rooms are in restricted areas. After the passing of the storm, emergency management will determine shelter closing. If there's a significant impact, shelters may remain open for an extended period of time. If communications are still functioning, then the amateur radio operations will likely be terminated as directed by the emergency management officials. If communications are not functioning, we may be expected to remain on site. At that point, we'll begin contacting individuals who are not available for the passing of the storm and see if they can make themselves available for a shift in one of our sites to allow others to go home and check on things. These are our primary operating frequencies. We learned in the last drill that the EOC also needs to be monitoring our tactical channel 147.555. One of the shelters had a radio that would not transmit on 145.49, the repeater, for some reason. We could hear them transmitting voice on the packet frequency as they tried to get our attention in the EOC. Note that the Odin HF function will be accomplished by an offsite representative, since the EOC function does not currently have HF capabilities. Mike, KB4CAU, has done this for us in the past. We have not integrated digital voice into our response yet. D-Star is listed there for reference. We are also working to stand up a DMR repeater. We may eventually add those to the plan. Here is a depiction of all of our shelter, support, and infrastructure sites. This is a notional depiction of the mesh footprint. We don't have actual connection map available. We are currently on hold for further mesh development and work because as the city wrestles through providing access to sites previously approved, various offices have conflicting opinions on the subject. Since we are basically operating on a FEMA grant and the current status of the system does not meet the intent of that grant, I anticipate eventual approval to restore the system and continue to expand it. Currently, everything is working except for the path to the EOC itself. That's the entire point of the system. Okay, that's the intro. We'll have additional information on shelter kit operations as well as a detailed look at each site and our overall operations in coming videos. Thank you. Thank you for attending.